Hello and thank you for watching another edition of ARFCOM News. This week, we all get to join hands and laugh at Los Angeles having to pay $150,000 to the NRA, federal Reinvents the Cartridge, and maybe, just maybe, the Palmetto State Armory Dagger is getting close to release. But first, I want to tell you about the simple, home-crafted night vision products at tnvc.com. Made by honest, hard-working Amish operators from fine mahogany and leather in the traditional fashion, just like Mom used to make. If you like seeing stuff more than not seeing stuff, take a look at our sponsor, tnvc.com, your source for quality night vision gear to make you the bump in the night. As I'm recording this, I just heard the ATF up and decided the Q Honey Badger is a short barrel rifle. The Honey Badger is a wee devil with a pistol brace, and the BATFE has had a fickle history with their opinion on whether a brace makes a pistol into a rifle. This could have broad implications, but I'll have to cover it next week after I've had a chance to hear what smart people think. The Los Angeles City Hall, which is totally not filled with the type of people its phallic shape seems to indicate, will have to pay $150,000 to the NRA. Last year, the famously oppressive capital of all things apocalyptic passed an ordinance that required anyone seeking a contract with the city to disclose dealings with the NRA. The stated purpose being to prevent city funds from supporting activism that is critical of the city's oppressive gun restrictions. Obviously, that's like super illegal, and the NRA promptly drove a truckload of lawyers right through that ordinance back in December. U.S. District Court Judge Stephen Wilson found the text of the ordinance's legislative history, and the concurrent public statements made by the ordinance's primary legislative sponsor evince a strong intent to suppress the speech of the NRA. Even though the ordinance only forces disclosure of activity that may not be expressive, the clear purpose of the disclosure is to undermine the NRA's explicitly political speech. So yeah, if you're going to run roughshod over the Constitution, at least have the sense to refrain from admitting your intent publicly. Usually, when this sort of thing happens, the scumbag politicians just rewrite the law in a slightly less offensive manner and try again, but LA got smacked down so hard they didn't even try to rewrite the ordinance. So the good guys won and everyone lived happily ever after, right? Sure, except that Los Angeles refused to pay the bill.
Boo! Boo!
Like a petulant child who goes home and takes his ball with him, LA tried to claim the NRA had to pay their own legal fees. But Judge Wilson recently ordered the city to pay the NRA's tab, and now we can have a happy ending. But no matter how many times Calistani autocrats get smacked down in court, they keep coming back for more. Just in time for Spooktober, Californistan's Attorney General Javier Becerra is suing the BATFE in an attempt to force F-Troop to regulate so-called ghost guns.
Boo! Boo!
Becerra says the only logical intended result of a ghost gun kit is that it will become a firearm. And maybe he's right. But the Gun Control Act of 1968 doesn't charge the federal government with regulating things that could become a firearm. And the U.S. Constitution specifically prohibits them from regulating anything that actually is a gun. He went on to whimper ineffectually that anyone can make them, and because they lack serial numbers, they cannot be traced by law enforcement agencies. The lawsuit claims the so-called ghost gun market has, and I quote, exponentially exploded. But I guess you don't have to be good at maths to pass the bar in California, because it took 6 years for the number of 80% retailers in Californistan to go from 9 to 18. So, I mean, technically, yeah, it's an exponential increase in the sense that it's increasing at a rate of 9 to the first power every 6 years, he said, pushing up his glasses and snorting awkwardly. But what Becky doesn't get is that it has always been legal and easy for people to make their own gun. And anyone can buy a cap and ball revolver through the mail because it isn't even legally a firearm. Sure, recent advances in technology have made it easier to make guns at home, but that doesn't magically bestow the government with imaginary powers. For the sake of argument, though, let's pretend it would be legal for the federal government to ban, restrict, interfere, tax, or otherwise infringe upon so-called ghost guns. How would they do that? It's just not feasible to place the same restrictions on a lump of metal as on a functioning gun. And if you try, the law of unintended consequences is bound to kick in. If people had to start filing a 4473 to transfer metal ingots, forgings, castings, or even non-gun owners are going to be righteously pissed, and they might just find out how easy it would be to make a gun. But as devastating as any of that would be for the authoritarian enthusiast crowd, the real end of days Becky is unwillingly calling upon himself is that this case is definitely going to force a decision on what a firearm really is under federal law. And that means the ATF will likely be unable to continue to maintain their position that an AR lower is the receiver. For as long as Eugene Stoner's, peace be upon him, design has been available for civilian sale, the lower receiver has been considered the firearm. That opinion has been rather convenient for gun owners because we could just swap out uppers with different calibers, barrel lengths, etc., all in the same lower. But the problem is an AR-15 lower doesn't really fit the definition of a firearm receiver in the 1968 Gun Control Act. The upper doesn't fully fit the definition either, but the upper checks more of those items in the definition than the lower does. So what would happen if AR-15 uppers were suddenly considered to be the firearm? Short answer, utter chaos. Maybe? And some stuff might not matter. You have a vanilla 16-inch AR, you're fine. The wrong part is serialized, but until you transfer it to someone else, that wouldn't really matter because you aren't making it or selling it, and that's when the law really cares about what part is serialized. And you didn't deface a serial number either. Maybe you would have to make a firearm by engraving the upper with serial number. The real issue is what happens to the registered full auto M16 lowers out there, or what happens to my short upper with M16 bolt carrier and a pistol lower. I don't know. It's all too confusing for my pretty little head. I'm not a lawyer because there are some things that even I won't do for a Klondike bar, so maybe there's something I'm missing here. Come to think of it, I'm probably missing an awful lot. So if you know how things would shake out, comment below. The FBI killed a man while serving a warrant for weapon charges. And the Fed boys won't tell us what those charges were. I'm going to say right up front that odds are this guy was indeed a dirtbag and the federales were probably doing their jobs right, and at least according to one witness, it sounds like their use of force was definitely justified. The witness said the subject of the warrant fled and shot while he was running, injuring one of the feds. So don't get it twisted, I'm not saying the FBI did anything illegal here. For all we know, this guy had a basement full of dead hookers.
Oh my goodness! What are you doing? I've never seen so many dead hookers in all my life.
But I'm not okay with any organ of the state keeping silent on the reasons they created a situation in which a human being dies. Yes, I understand that undercover investigations are a thing and that police can't do their jobs with total transparency all the time. But once a subject of a warrant is dead, it's pretty safe to say we don't have to worry about him finding out the 5-0 is onto him. I believe that anytime a person is arrested, injured, or killed because of something the government does, they have a duty to announce what their business was in the incident in the first place, immediately. Now, body cam and official timelines and whatnot can wait for a reasonable time, of course. We don't want to jeopardize other investigations. But in all this new wave of demand for transparent and accountable policing, I'm concerned that federal agencies are totally ignoring the reasonable concessions that most local law enforcement departments have already made over the last few years. I'll bet you a beer we never see the body cam footage from this incident. And again, I know this particular investigation was almost certainly kosher, and everything is probably fine, but if in some cyberpunk dystopian future the federal government were to ever secretly spy on citizens and abuse their positions of trust for political gain, it sure would be nice to keep an eye on them. Vaguely worded weapon charges could mean the man violated laws that I think shouldn't even exist. If any of you can find out what the specific charges were or whether there were any other charges that are not related to the mere possession of a firearm, please post them below. Kylerittenhouse, aka the Kenosha Kid, is suing Joe Biden and his campaign for libel by suggesting Rittenhouse is a white supremacist when Biden tweeted a video with Kyle's picture as the preview and the caption, "There's no other way to put it. The President of the United States refused to disavow white supremacists on the debate stage last night." Rittenhouse was involved in a well-documented shooting incident in Wisconsin, which has been heavily politicized. Although there's no evidence that Rittenhouse was associated with any white supremacist groups or expressed any white supremacist opinions, and every one of the 3 convicted criminals who were shot while attacking him were white, apparently Godwin's law is universal. But it's one thing for some rando on the socials to call a person racist, and it's quite another for a presidential candidate to do it. Rittenhouse is being charged with first-degree murder even though the shooting appears to be justified, and Stranger Danger's senior moment may have just created a permanent mistrial for Rittenhouse. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but wouldn't it be easy for the defense counsel to argue that it is impossible to form an impartial jury if a presidential candidate publicly declared Kyle to be a racist? And that argument gets even more traction if Biden is elected, so it's a double dose of stupid. Speaking of stupid, remember all those Virginia counties that passed 2A sanctuary resolutions earlier this year? Yeah, they've been quietly seizing guns under Virginia's shiny new red flag law. Or, as I prefer to call it, take some of a crazy person's guns, but let them roam free so we can find out if they buried guns in the woods after they used them law. But I guess that doesn't roll off the tongue quite so easily. In fact, roughly half of the red flag orders in the first few months the law was in effect came from counties who passed pro-2A resolutions. Don't get me wrong, some of the folks who were the subject of a red flag order are nuttier than squirrel scat, but that's exactly why red flag laws are so dangerous. One of them is accused of pointing a gun at his neighbor's forehead and demanding he wanted to know why this place is creeping on me. Cops found him driving slowly across his front lawn with a slung rifle, and he told them, "I could have taken all of you." I don't think I'm out of line in saying this guy really needs a mental health evaluation. It is and should be illegal to point guns at people. And of course, bizarre behavior like that is deeply concerning. But taking some of a person's guns and failing to address the mental health issues while leaving them access to other weapons is a profoundly negligent course of action. Most states already have a process for police officers to refer people involuntarily to mental health treatment. Should some states improve such processes or create them in the first place? Probably. Do we need to ensure these processes involve multiple safeguards to keep politically connected folks from locking everyone up they disagree with as a loony? Obviously. But the rational approach to dangerous people is to apprehend the person, assess them, allow them to have a say in the process, and to have an advocate for their interests. Red flag laws violate the First, Second, Fourth, Fifth, and 14th Amendments. Federal has reinvented cartridges for front stuffers. Many states have muzzle-loading hunting seasons separate from rifle seasons. Arizona lumps handgun, archery, and muzzleloader into one season. The idea being each of those tools is a little more challenging to harvest game with than a hunting rifle. So the season opens earlier than rifle season, and for some ham hunts, you can get an over-the-counter tag instead of having to enter a lottery. Obviously, the rules vary by state, but there are some solid reasons to choose these obsolete guns. That means there are some pretty modern inline muzzle-loading rifles out there, and the industry is constantly innovating. Enter the Federal Fire Stick. It's a watertight plastic cartridge that contains the propellant charge. The user inserts a .209 shotgun primer in the cartridge, stuffs a bullet down the front, then inserts the cartridge in the breech of the rifle. There's a little ring of metal between the bullet and the powder charge, which is presumably what allows the gun to still be considered a muzzle loader, and yes, that means this product will only work in guns designed for it. It also means the legal status isn't really nailed down yet everywhere. Federal says it's confirmed legal in 15 states, and some 20 others are reviewing their hunting regulations. And 15 other states are like, LOL, IDK, I guess? In all seriousness, it will take some time for states to make an official statement on whether they consider the newfangled contraption to be a muzzle loader under their own regulations, and they're all written differently. That said, it would seem rather obtuse to not consider it a muzzle loader. Even New Jersey and New York do.
New York City.
So my entirely unsubstantiated guess is that most, if not all, states will eventually consider this thing to be a front stuffer. Each cartridge will cost about $3. AmmoLand TV published an exclusive first look video where they got a chance to spend some range time with the Palmetto State Armory's Dagger. No official release date as yet, but hopefully this video signals the project is getting close to completion, and the PSA website does say they expect to ship within 10 to 15 days. Saying this is a Glock clone might prompt people to get all litigation-y, so let's just say the Dagger is a striker-fired polymer frame pistol that's the same size as the G19 and is compatible with OEM and third-party Glock parts and is supposed to retail for about $300. I handled one at SHOT this year, and by all appearances it's quite Glockish, but it has a bunch of features that are typically seen on custom and semi-custom Glockish guns, like forward slide serrations and an aggressive cut at the bottom of the grip to facilitate stripping out empty magazines. It even comes with actual steel sights installed rather than the plastic dovetail protectors that come with Glock pistols. And yes, it takes Glock mags. And what better ammo could there possibly be to load your Dagger with other than Dagny Dagger? Atlas Arms has released a video of their Dagny Dagger 9mm ammunition perforating a level 3A soft panel, indicating they're making some progress on their project as well. The idea is basically armor-piercing handgun ammo that doesn't meet the federal definition of armor-piercing handgun ammo. If that sounds to you like a shaky business proposition, I don't blame you. Don't get me wrong, I like the idea and I hope they're successful. I just don't think I would have the guts to launch a business based on doing an end run around federal law, no matter how stupid and unconstitutional the law is. The core of the matter, if you'll pardon pun, is that federal law defines armor-piercing ammo as having a projectile that's made entirely of or has a core made of any of these materials. The law makes no mention whatsoever of actual performance, so if your projectile or your core doesn't contain those materials, it is not armor-piercing. At least, until Congress passes an amendment to 18 U.S.C. 921. This is the kind of thing that causes mucho pearl clutching, and phrases like reaching across the aisle, bipartisan support, and utmost respect for first responders get thrown around a lot. Politicians of every stripe are happy to line up to ban stuff when it has a label like cop killer.
Hey, Rick! Cop killer!
Never mind that crooks wear armor too, and that first responders could also benefit if the ammo works well. And judging by the video, it looks like it does. The Dagny Dagger fires a non-discarding sabot with a metal core. On impact, the sabot expands, somewhat like a traditional hollow point. They show a video in clear gel that appears to indicate it might be pretty skookum in regard to tissue destruction too. Bear in mind that wound appearance in ballistic gel does not necessarily correlate with real-world wounding, and clear gel produces inaccurate penetration measurements, he said, pushing his glasses up yet again. Still, the primary purpose of this ammo is poking holes in armor, and it does that well. If it can also produce enhanced wounding, that's just icing on the cake. Although the details of construction are not published right now, Atlas Arms promises they will open source everything once the project is complete. In the meantime, they are accepting donations on their website, so if you want to hold your place in line, that's the way to do it. So last week, the secret phrase was, "All that hate's gonna burn you up, kid." And I should have said the best comment would get a free shirt, because clearly the best comment was this one by David Evans. It was winter of 2035. The Second American Revolution was in full swing. High in the mountains near Ruby Ridge, Idaho, I watched for signs of the enemy alphabet boys. The frigid cold cut through my jacket, but the post needed to be manned. I looked at my watch, 0400. The rest of the men were bound to be getting up. In either case, I'd be relieved and some warm food, and a few Z's would be headed my way. I scanned the tree line for the ATF. I hate them. I hate them all, I mumbled to myself. All that hate's gonna burn you up, kid. Whirling around, I saw his old Sarge, a veteran of Desert Storm. This man was older than the mountain itself. Go inside and get some chow. I'll finish up here. I awkwardly stood to my half-asleep feet, and even more awkwardly clambered out of the hastily dug pit. I walked back to the barracks, looking over my shoulder. The Sarge was already taking up his position with his M16A2. Sarge never liked optics, but was the best shot in our outfit. He led by example and inspired us all to be our best. but the time for inspiration was 0600. I laid my head down on my cold pillow and brought the hole-filled blanket up to my chin. Food could wait. This long, bitter war could wait. What I needed most was sleep. Everything was going to be okay. Old Sarge was on watch. Memoirs of the 1st Liberty Infantry Division, My Days in the Boogaloo. I don't know about you, but I would totally read that graphic novel, and it's posts like this that make the interwebs such a magical place. So I'm going to rephrase the rules this time. The secret phrase this week is, I am a meat popsicle. The best comment containing the secret phrase gets a free shirt. That's probably the top comment or most updated, but saying best gives me some wiggle room to choose a clearly deserving comment like the one I just read. Keep it PG, and I might read it in the next episode. Well, gentle viewer, that's the end of the line for me. I hope you enjoy watching these things because I sure like making them for you. If you want to help us keep bringing you banger content like this, please support the folks who support us. Not only does TNVC.com carry a wide selection of low-carb, fat-free, non-GMO night vision products, they also have mounts, lights, and all sorts of other gear to make you the bump in the night. And if you want to support us more directly, you can get fly shirts like this one in our Teespring store. I love you. California stamp. California's a place you ought to be, so they loaded up the truck and moved to Beverly. Brought to you by Black Button Porter. Yeah, I know. Mute, but whatever. In the ghetto. On a cold and gray Chicago night in the ghetto. When a little baby cries at night in the ghetto. In the ghetto.